When we look at symphonic music of the 20th century, Shostakovich obviously is one of the greatest of the 20th century composers. He wrote 15 fantastic symphonies. He made his first impact with the first symphony, a student work, and it was a sensation. Already people heard something very special in this composer. The next piece of real significance symphonically was the fourth symphony. By now he had written an opera, Lady Macbeth, which had been criticized by Stalin in Pravda. And when Stalin didn't like a piece, you're on the edge. All of a sudden, you might be in trouble. He was criticized for his associations. He was criticized for his music being formulist music, whatever that may mean. It wasn't patriotic enough. It wasn't simple enough for the people. He once was questioned, and he was going to be questioned some more by the predecessors of the KGB. Fortunately for Shostakovich, the man who was doing the questioning became questioned himself, and then the Shostakovich was safe for a while. So we arrive at 1937, and it's time for the premiere of his fourth symphony. His friends were concerned. Mravensky was going to do the premiere of the fourth symphony in St. Petersburg, and they decided to cancel the premiere. They were afraid that it would meet with a bad reception from the authorities. And after being so severely criticized, he didn't want to take that chance. So then he wrote the fifth symphony, and Shostakovich wrote very quickly. So in the spring he started, by the summer he finished. It was premiered in St. Petersburg by Mravensky in the winter, and was a huge sensation. In a way, if he was in trouble, that piece saved his life. The first movement is absolutely staggering in its concept. I think it's important to know that by the time we're here in 1937, composers were much freer about form. So where Beethoven or Schumann pretty much worked in the first movement, what we call sonata form, where you have the exposition where all the material is exposed, the development, all that material is developed, and the recapitulation, where all that material is reprised. Composers like Shostakovich, yes, they did some of that, and sometimes they did it absolutely in an old-fashioned way. Other times it was very free form. This symphony's first movement, even though it feels very organic, it feels like it belongs the way it's written, is very much in the style of being free form. It begins in an interesting way. It's an introduction, but it's an aggressive introduction, and it's a canon. It starts with the cellos and the basses. They play this, and then the violins play, and then the cellos and basses, and the violins. And then that canonic gesture carries on now. So the cellos and the basses, and then the repeat violas. And that becomes the accompaniment to the melody played by the first violins. It's lyrical, sad. For me, it's a sad melody. And then all of a sudden, one wind instrument playing initial material in unison with the pizzicato, plucked cellos and basses. Eventually, the woodwinds enter throughout this whole section, the woodwinds will come in playing new material, but the strings will come in again playing. You'll hear coming back in. Next comes the second theme. The accompaniment now, again, we talked about how simple Shostakovich's accompaniments are. He has this rhythm that he uses all the time. It's long, short, short, long, short, short. That is the accompaniment to the melody played by the first violins. This theme gets reduced at times. We call that diminution. It's made into a smaller gesture, and at times it's augmented. We call it augmentation, where it's made into a bigger gesture. This theme gets then changed to be a viola melody. And in this piece, the very high violas have the same thing. One could say, why does Shostakovich write for the high violas? That's the violin range. But I think that there's a different sound, and having the violas struggling in the highest register to play this melody beautifully is very different from having the violins play it easily and simply. This leads us to the development section. Now, it's interesting that it starts with the double basses in the piano and the low register playing. Notice the rhythm. Ba-ba-bum, ba-ba-bum. Short, short, long, short, short, long. And then the melody that I told you about, remember the violins playing? Well, now that theme is made into very long notes, much longer, and in the very lowest register of the horn. Again, it's from the violas playing too high, you're going to hear the horns playing too low. And then the trumpets come in, also playing in the very lowest register. Shortly after that, the woodwinds enter. When they enter, they play that same theme, except they play it fast. Again, if you were just listening to it, you wouldn't even notice it. It just all seems to fit. But now that I point it out to you and you hear it in the orchestra, you say, oh, wow, look what he's doing there. Next, we have that second theme, but this time it's condensed. The woodwinds play it twice, 3 times faster. Finally, it leads to the grotesque march. You have that same rhythm, long, short, short, long, short, short, long, except played by the snare drum. In this case, we have used a low-pitched snare drum. And the trumpets and the brass play that same first theme of the violins in a march, in a very aggressive way. Eventually, all the woodwinds join in, all the brass join in, and it builds up to this tremendous climax where we have the same material from the very beginning of the piece in a canon with the upper woodwinds and the upper strings and the middle range woodwinds and the middle range strings, but playing it much, much faster. Just feels like everything's going to explode, and it does. It builds up to an incredible climax. He slows it down. Now, most people would go faster for the climax. He brings it back and brings it back. The whole orchestra is playing that theme, theme 1, that first theme, in unison. It's the end of the development, or it's the beginning of the recapitulation. I do this bringing all the material back from the beginning in this very loud way, in a very free way, like a recitativo, and it's punctuated by the timpani and the brass. When it comes to an end, we again go back to the same long, short, short, long accompaniment, and this time the flute plays the melody, the second melody. But there's an incredible answer by the horn. It's a magical moment, a duet for the flute and horn. And the horn, again, into the highest register. Very difficult, and a great, great moment, which leads us to what we can call the coda, which is also fascinating, because what happens is that theme that we know so well is played in what we call inversion. So instead of going down, it goes up. This time played by the flute. We've heard that punctuation of the timpani and the trumpets at the end of the recitativo. Now he uses that punctuation, but very, very softly. And he writes a solo for the piccolo and the solo violin. Poignant ending. And at the end, he brings in the celesta. And it just evaporates.